Welcome to Riverdale After Dark, a podcast about the CW's Riverdale that's really going through it this week. I'm Alex.
When you walk through the darkness of a small suburban town, fear grips you. You're surrounded by inky blackness. What's that in the distance? A calming, gentle flame. You run toward it to find peace. Oh, it's a chill comic book burning. Uh-oh. I'm Justin.
And we are going to be talking about Riverdale Season 7, Episode 13, Chapter 130, The Crucible, directed by, once again, none other than Mädchen Amick. So, very exciting. Doesn't appear in the episode, but she does appear behind the camera.
Behind the camera. It's hard to do both. It's hard to do both.
Presumably, there's a lot of, reflective surfaces she got caught in, if you look at, mirrors and whatever. Directors never really care about that stuff. That's sort of how, Hitchcock would do that. He'd be like, I'm going to ruin the shot.
Yeah, he said that was like his catchphrase almost.
He was like the Animaniacs, except for filming thriller movies. Anyway,
he's got a lot of yakko energy.
He lived in a water tower. Did you know that? That's a fun fact.
It's where they got the idea for the Animaniacs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Anyway, here's some recap about what's going on in Riverdale, because there's a lot of stuff going on at this point. Let's start with Jughead and Ethel. Jughead and Ethel have been working on a comic book together for Pep Comics based on the murder of Ethel's parents, as well as the fact that she murdered the milkman who murdered her parents, which everybody seems to have brushed by and is pretty much
really moved past that quickly. Yeah. No notes.
They created a comic book that, instead of a milkman, had a mailman. They were going to really raunch it up. And their editor, Mr. Fieldstone, was very encouraging of that. We see the blowback of this episode, specifically tying into Dr. Werthers, who works at Riverdale High in some capacity, who has been writing strongly worded letters and essays about the use of comic books and how they tie into the disparaging of youth. I don't know what the phrase is there, but whatever it is. Basically, he's a stand-in.
The pollution of their minds, Alex.
There you go. It ties into Dr. Wortham, who is a real-life figure who railed against comic books and led to the Comics Code Authority. So that's the storyline that we're playing with there. Meanwhile, we could talk about what is going on with Cheryl and Toni are dating. That's probably important to know. And Kevin and Clay are dating. We're in the 1950s, though, so even more so than today, they are not allowed to be out and proud. They're very well aware of that, but it is a struggle that they've been dealing with all season. It's something that definitely comes to a head here. Also, what comes to a head is Archie has been writing and experimenting with poetry. That's something that he's very interested in this new semi-rebooted timeline. He has been encouraged by Miss Thornton, your favorite character, I believe, Justin.
Well, last episode, I was like, wow, huge Thornton episode. And I was so wrong. This is the big Thornton episode. I guess the fond farewell, I want to say, to Miss Thornton.
Well, we'll pick up with her presumably on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, The Next Generation, since she's heading over to Greendale. Spoiler for what happens in the episode.
To be a volunteer librarian, which is not a cash-heavy biz. I don't know what she's got going.
Yeah, well, she'll figure out something. She's scrappy, as we know from all of our favorite Miss Thornton episodes. So Archie
she'll likely be murdered in Greendale. So.
Absolutely. Perfect. She is going to be eaten by some sort of demon. So the other big thing that we're dealing with this episode, which Veronica very helpfully lays out, but I did a big report on this in high school, so I'm very familiar. Senator McCarthy and his witch hunts on communism. He established something called the House Un-American Activities Community. And basically, like Veronica lays out, made up communists, and it wrecked society for a very long period of time because people, even if there was suspicion, would be arrested, would be thrown in jail, would be questioned, their lives completely ruined. So the show in this episode uses that to kind of blow out into a bunch of other things. With Veronica, for example, it ties into her ongoing storyline with her parents, who we haven't seen so far this season. We finally do get to see them in this episode. We know that Hiram and Hermione are the co-stars of a very popular TV show called Omiha, which Veronica hates. So there you go. But she kind of she's been banished to Riverdale in this episode, as we'll talk about in a second. Hiram shows up, and then later on in the episode, Hermione shows up as well. What else do we need to know? Veronica and Betty grew pretty close last episode. That seems to be...
That's one way of saying it, yeah.
Yes, well, they definitely expressed a romantic interest in each other the last episode. That doesn't exactly play in this episode, surprisingly. And in fact, we start to get some sparks towards Archie in a different way, which...
This episode, from the ship's perspective, was an absolute roller coaster.
Yes.
It's just truly throwing sawdust in the dynamite, pushing us away from a lot of the expected end games.
And I will also throw out there, I mean, there's a couple of other like Easter eggy and return things, but one big thing you should probably know is way back in season 1, Archie was sexually assaulted by a lady named Miss Grundy, who is his teacher. Great news, she's back.
Well, and I mean, to get into that a little bit, I was like, who is this for? This is meant to be a stress, I guess, or something. I guess because it's the ship that the show started with for Archie, especially back then.
Like very tenuously called ship, I would say.
Yeah. But I mean, I use the word short for relationship. It was the relationship that Archie was certainly the most interested in. It played into the larger plot of the death of Jason Blossom. So like, it was a major thing. And for the, back then, the lead of Riverdale, and I think that has changed a bit and become much more of an ensemble, but to have Archie having this inappropriate relationship with Grundy as a main driver for the first season, and then to bring her back here, she's married, and big reveal, lives with her husband, which I did some Googling. Turns out a lot of married people live with their partner. Yeah.
Okay.
So like,
gotta try this.
Yeah, you should really give it a shot. It's easier commuting.
Yeah. Don't you? So how do you do you share the same bedroom, or like what do you do? Do you get like a 2-bedroom apartment?
Seems crazy.
2-bedroom apartment.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
2-bedroom. And then, because you can't sleep in the same bed with someone would be crazy.
You're supposed to, oh my God, rolling around all over the place, sharing a blanket? No thanks.
Sweaty. Sharing a blanket, exactly. I need my own private blanket.
You.
Sleeping bag. Sleeping bag, please.
Here is my take on this, and I know we're jumping right to the end of the episode here, but I definitely think this was this was one of the big things that the episode left me with. I agree with you on, I don't know who this is for. I don't know who is demanding to see Miss Grundy again. 100%, nothing against the actress, Sarah Habel, who does a good job in the role. I'm glad that she got more work and is coming back. All of that stuff is good. But in terms of Greg Grundy, I recoiled when I saw it. I was like, oh no, oh no. Yeah. And the way that Major Abbott films the reveal, she's literally behind him like a horror movie slasher, and the camera spins around and reveals her, and you're like, oh God, she's the one replacing Miss Thornton. Oh God, are we going through this again? But my impression is, and you can say what you want about the overall, should they have brought her back at all? Probably not, but they did. So this isn't exactly justice for Grundy. That's 100% not the right way to put it. But I do think they were very specific about you are worried about this because you know what happened previously. Now we've brought back Miss Grundy. She is married. She is only going to tutor Archie in poetry. That is it. And Archie seems happy about it. We are showing, and maybe I'm being too generous here, but I take it as part of what they're trying to do with this overall season is show us a way out of the darkness of Riverdale. Give options for these characters, and that's what I took away from it.
Well, I think of it in a growing up context. They get to redo a lot of things because of the nature of the time jump that they did and all that. So I think we get to see a more mature Archie, a more mature show, maybe everyone a little bit more understanding, making different choices because things have changed. So I think that's really interesting. This episode especially is dealing with a lot more mature themes and pushing through, finding it, like making us scared about what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then the characters are going to move through it, I think, over the course of the rest of the season. So that's really cool. Also, I think the more we pull away, and I'm trying to not be a Barchi head here, but the more they pull away from the expected endgame ships, the more exciting it will be when they move toward them. Mm-hmm. And that goes true for Bughead as well, if that's what your preference is, because that's, we don't get any of that here. The closest we get to a Barchi scene is Archie and Betty sharing a scene from the Crucible. Right. So
this, to me, just from a ship perspective, almost felt like one of those classic Riverdale, hey, have they seen the last episodes, And I don't know. We'll see how it all ties together and everything. But I think, I was very surprised about the Varchi thing. I was very surprised about not following up on Veronica at all. I felt like things were heading very clearly in a very steady progression over the course of the first 10 episodes. And I feel like we're getting some wild swerves and twists here. We'll see how that pans out. We still do have a bunch of real estate in Riverdale time to go. But like you said, I'm surprised that we got a Varchi kiss because that didn't seem to be on Veronica's agenda at all. I am surprised that we didn't touch on Barchi. I'm surprised that we didn't touch on Veronica. Let's see what happens, I guess. I don't know.
Well, the show turns on a dime. And this, we went from absolute nothing in the Varchi department to, they're just having a pretty, a nice conversation. Hey, cool scene today. Then it's oh, chemistry. Oh, let's do this. And Archie's sort of huh? I like that. So he's being Archie. And of course, it's the whole point of the show is that it could go any which way. It just depends on where we are headed and where we end.
Well, and it also doesn't probably help. I mean, we'll see what obviously the reaction is. But with all of the stuff coming out over the past week with the wrap of the show, it did officially wrap. It took a couple more days than we expected, but it ended up wrapping up this past Monday. Yes.
And we got personal confiration from Lily Reinhardt on Twitter.
We did. Yes, we did.
So that's the only confirmation.
It was breaking news directly to us, so that was nice. Yeah. We did tweet out because there were several days where it was I think it's ending today. I think it's ending today. And we put out probably on Twitter, and she was yes. And she clearly was getting fed up because there were a bunch of those viral tweet accounts who over several days were Riverdale has wrapped forever after 7 seasons. And then the next day it'd be well, here we are back filming again. So they put out a bunch of, my point though was they put out a bunch of very emotional videos, but of course people are looking at it to be oh my God, is this the last scene? Is this how it's ending? Certainly a lot of people have been plumbing into the fact that it was Lily Reinhardt, Cole Sprouse, and Madeline Petch were the last 3 main cast members. I think Drew Ray Tanner was also maybe there the last day as well, and they just didn't mention it for whatever reason. But there were a bunch of videos that I thought were very sweet of both Lily and Cole giving speeches to everybody. But of course, the shippers are looking at it with very different eyes. They're oh.
I mean, it raised my eyebrow that they are on the last day. But
yeah, well, there's that. There was also one, I think, of Betty and Veronica on the same side of the bench at Pops. And that certainly, given the whole Veronica storyline, people are are we going to get a wild swerve here? Is this going to end with Veronica? So I don't know. I don't mind it. It gives me a little bit of a thrill of, maybe we're going to get back to anything could happen, because I enjoyed the fact that we were getting this steady progression over the first half of the season. But if they shake things up, that's classic Riverdale as well.
Well, and also Endgame is it became everything we talk about with this, but the natural state of these characters and the natural state of the show is for them to not be in any relationship. Mm-hmm. So I think there's also a chance, and I'm sure it's a tempting chance as a creative on the show to be no, they should all be hanging out together, making eyes at each other, because that's what it is. That's what the show is always, is never knowing who you might be kissing next and suddenly have a big, intense chemistry with. So there's a huge chance that that's what could be, and maybe we'll have to be satisfied with whoever makes the last eye contact or whatever.
Again, I'm going to push my agenda. It's going to be KJ Apa turning to the camera and looking directly at us, the viewer.
Yeah. And it's kissing the camera, kissing the screen, and we have to kiss the screen. Mm-hmm. And then the show announces, it's you, Alex, you kiss KJ Apa. You're with him.
Yeah, they can use AI to say everybody's names personally, I think. Yeah. That's how it works.
Hey, Alexander Zalbin, you are
Archie's Endgame. kill me.
Whoa, the AI really went rogue at the end there.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens to that. Why don't we jump into
this show moves too fast for my artificial intelligence.
Stay tuned for a all-new America's Funniest Dogs. All right, why don't we actually get into plot lines? Because there are some very meaty plot lines in this episode. You want to talk about... Well, I guess we could talk about like the main storyline in terms of communism, like there's
Miss Thornton.
Yeah,
well, yes. I guess we already covered Thornton, but it was the biggest storyline.
Most of the rest of this podcast for the next 2 hours is going to be talking about Miss Thornton.
Yeah, Thornton After Dark.
Well, basically, like I was saying earlier, they use communism as this frame, but it's not an excuse, but a way in to talk about a lot of other types of attacks and prejudice and things like that. So you got this communism thing. That's something that's thrown out there by Clifford Blossom. We get to see Penelope Blossom briefly as a teacher, which is pretty ridiculous.
Well, just on that, I was like, they're like, this Miss Thornton is too much of a threat to our children. And then Penelope walks in straight up like an X-Men villain in like black and red leather. She's like, hello, children. She's like Cruella DeVille, but trying to make a teenager skin coat. It was made me laugh that they're like, and she takes over for 30 seconds before Grundy comes in. Hiram comes in and then Grundy takes over.
Well, the other thing this ties into, which I thought was really interesting, was the whole class has to give these monologues in front of everybody, and they're doing them from real plays. We find out that Juliet is a terrible actor thanks to Hiram's coaching, which is a fun,
I love that scene.
Very fun bit.
Hiram's like, hey, bro, what's with you? You a man? He's like, yeah. And he's like, no, you're not. You're no man. Just absolutely. Yeah,
everybody's losing it. Cheryl is laughing hysterically, has to put her head down on the desk. So that's great. But you've got this interesting thing where like, and I don't know how you play something like this, but you are an actor playing a part, playing another part, you know?
Yeah.
And I wonder how much that plays into it. And the reason I say is like Veronica's monologue is very much to me Veronica doing the monologue. Like that is her performing it. But the way that KJ Apa performs that monologue for the Crucible, to me, I didn't necessarily get any Archie there so much as the emotions that Archie is going through. But legit, that like got me a little teary-eyed when I was watching it. That was an incredible performance of the Crucible.
Well, yes. And just watching that, I was like, oh, this is just from a KJ Apa acting perspective. I was like, this is hard. He has to capital A act in character, delivering a very intense, it's not Shakespeare like Veronica ends up, but it's on that level of words with a huge amount of weight behind them. And he does really crush it. He brings the heat. And I love the way they shot it too, because we see him and we see the power he's doing, but then we cut to everyone's faces and they are just like braced. They're just like shocked by the intensity of it. And then it inspires Cheryl to go down and not name names. And I thought it was just a greatly constructed, a great performance, all of that, but just a great plot progression of having Archie just crush his monologue so much so that Cheryl made her point that she'd been wanting to make, but didn't have the push.
Well, and to loop back to something earlier in the season that we talked also a little bit of the last episode of the podcast, I think like as much as I really didn't like the Cheryl-Archie relationship and got very uncomfortable about points of that, setting up the fact that Cheryl and Archie have a connection in this timeline and having that pan out in different ways, in a way where I don't know if Cheryl would have been as affected by what happens with Archie if they didn't have that bond from earlier in the season. So it really worked for me, him spurring her on to do that.
Well, and it feels like, because we don't ever see many scenes of them being like, hey, what's up? How are you feeling? It's very much like an understanding. It's almost like a distant, eyes meet and be like, you're going through something. Or like, I see you, I feel what you're feeling, and I'm going to take it and move it forward. Well,
and just to take this one step further, and then we can move on to something else. I think the other thing that really helps is it helps the feeling of connection between the storylines, something that we've often pointed out is lacking in Riverdale, where you have all of these different trains running. So having those little moments where the characters riff off of things that happened with them previously that weren't in their own individual trains, but I don't know, cross the trains or whatever you want to call it. I think
just what you want to do is cross the trains.
Yeah. Isn't that what they say in Ghostbusters? Don't cross the streams, but cross them trains.
Yeah. Ghostbusters, which is, that's your like Garbage Pail Kids version of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
It's all just Stay Puft Explosion. Great. We know what we're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this ties into Veronica's storyline, which is the big returns in the episode. Hiram comes back to Riverdale. At first, he's like, I'm just here to visit my daughter. It's all good. Want to see your movie theater. I love it. Everything's great. But of course, he has more of an agenda. And it's specifically, he went to, how does he pronounce it? Cuba.
Yeah.
He goes to Cuba, and he was had pictures taken of him hanging out with Fidel Mastro, who was a revolutionary at the time.
Just amazing work here.
Is there a reason they couldn't use Fidel Castro? Like, I feel like they're very willy-nilly with it. They mentioned McCarthy in this episode.
Yeah.
But then they use Fidel Mastro. But I don't know, whatever, it's fine.
I agree. I was very surprised why the need to do that. Or I guess, are they saying Castro is like a brand that they are just hiding a little bit? like when they changed the name of chips and stuff?
Well, they had the fake candies on that newsstand that Jughead and Ethel go to, which we'll talk about that storyline in a second. Again, inconsistent, but it's fine.
That scene where Jughead exposed himself famously as a real ice freak. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know.
Like crazy for ice, extra ice. The only teenager ever to ask for extra ice.
He loves that ice. If he sees an ice bucket, Jughead be sticking his head in it.
That's sort of true.
Yes.
Great to see Hiram again. Like, I like his energy that he brings to the show. He's such a villain, even when, like, he doesn't do much villainy here. He just gets rolled by Veronica, basically, over the course of the episode. So, like, it's funny that he still has that energy when he's just, like, sort of her punching bag throughout the episode. I wanted to shout out he went to Cuba and is having an affair with a blonde woman named Kelly, which is clearly Kelly Ripa, his real world wife. Which
I don't know if the pictures were. I wasn't able to tell by looking at them closely enough. Yeah. But yes, very funny when he said that out loud. Also, we got to see Glenn back again. Yeah. That was Glenn, right?
I had to look a couple of times, but yes, I think it was just a 1950s upped Glenn.
Yes, exactly.
If you saw... yes. I saw the cat briefcase.
You did
if you look
in
the back
briefcase.
Of the car,
okay.
You could definitely see it back there. And you could just listen really close, play it back. You can hear a faint meow coming from the briefcase. Wow. And the meow is one of those, like, I'm really happy in this unit, this cat briefcase unit. I would never want to be anywhere else. And just for those of you that don't know, a cat briefcase, something we've talked about showing a lot, is a briefcase where you can put your cat, and on one end you have food to feed it, and on one end you have kitty litter to catch the poop.
Sure.
And the only trick with the cat briefcase, and I should have said this, and it'll be written in the instructions when we eventually sell them, is you got to make sure you put the cat in the right way. Because you don't want to put it in
you don't want to, because it has a hard time wiggling around if it's
hard to turn around in a cat briefcase.
Yes. I heard and saw that as well. So Glenn is back.
Sound off in the comments. You guys all did too.
So Glenn is back as the FBI agent, which was fun. It was a fun riff to see him there. I also really liked the shot of Archie seeing Veronica getting picked up by Glenn outside of the school and his reaction to that. Being like,
I love that. He just goes, Veronica. Just the quietest little Veronica.
Yeah.
Was very funny. And like, when I saw that, I was like, what a weird little moment. But I guess that sort of sets up the Archie moment later, that he's at least got eyes on.
I think so. They're working very hard to recreate a connection between them. No insult to Archie shippers at all, but we haven't been in that space for a very long time this season. So that is reestablishing the connection there, I think, and then leading up to that surprising kiss later in the episode in the middle of school, where she kisses his cheek, and then they pause, and then they have kiss. And it's a good kiss, mind you, but it definitely feels like it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, to them as well, to the characters. Like, they were just like, what the? Like, the cheek kiss is just like friendly, and then they look at their mouths are closed, and they're like, you know what? Let's go ahead and give it a main line, a grid kiss right here.
Yeah, I mean, to follow the Varchi shipper line of thinking, I think that's a good argument to be made of, oh, they have a connection that is too strong no matter what in any timeline. I'm sure people are like, that's them getting their memories back, their emotional memories back, and it's entirely possible. But more than anything, I'm curious to see where this goes, because I was not expecting it going into the episode, and now I think that throws a bunch of wrenches in a bunch of relationships, but we'll see if they follow them up. Not at all. Next episode.
Yeah, it could be anything, really. While we're talking about Cuba, I thought it was interesting that Cuba comes across in multiple storylines, and with the Featherhead Werther's thing of like, it's happening in Cuba, it's happening in Riverdale. The classic domino plan that America was worried about in the age of
Well, I will say, though, that is, obviously I was not alive in the 1950s, but from everything that I've read and studied, that is exactly what happened, that people freaked out about it on a very local basis. And they do the same thing with literally any sort of scare. They're like, oh my God, this thing happened 1 million miles away. It could happen here. We got to shut it down. And that's how fear spreads. Like, that is the point of the episode. So you're absolutely right to make fun of it because it's very silly and it's played to be silly. But at the same time, it legit is a real thing that happened at the time.
Well, like, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, it feels like a Riverdale plot to be like, communism, Cuba, Riverdale, we got to burn these comics. But that happened in the real world. Also,
right, exactly.
It's not just a Riverdale plot. It's a America plot.
Yeah. Now, to jump over to that, talk about the Jughead Ethel thing a little bit. Jughead and Ethel find out that their comic has been banned. However, there's a bunch of comics that Fieldstone just leaves kind of hanging there, so they steal them and end up selling them on a comic book black market inside of Pop's Diner. Which
I love that.
Feels like an ideal circumstance to me. Like, selling comics to people on the black market, you get to hang out with the diner. That's my dream job.
100%. Like, the way they run it like a speakeasy with him getting the money, tapping the quarter, Ethel hands the comic. I love that. And Jughead is like, crown on, sunglasses dipped down on his nose. He is living the dream until those motherfucking adventure scouts come through with their fascist camping regime and bust the comic sale. Unbelievable.
I mean, it does continue Sheriff Keller using children to do his work because he can't actually do any sort of copying himself.
They need to hire a deputy, an adult deputy.
Adult deputy? That seems unreasonable. I don't know.
Why is Keller
Only
farming
children.
out? First off, he's working for the principal. The 70-year-old principal is like, what do you need, boss? And then whenever he has something he has to do, he hires a much smaller community organization or child to handle the actual detective work. Yeah, which is wild. I also want to shout out they built this beautiful newsstand set at the beginning of the episode down a street. So nice. And it's in this scene for like 20 seconds. Like, we don't sell comics here, kid. And they just get bounced. End of set. I was like,
I did like that actor. That actor was definitely like, I've got 1 minute and I'm going to make it work. This is going straight up my reel.
That's 100% true.
Yeah.
And it works.
Let's talk about the Cheryl, Toni, Kevin, Clay storyline. I know we touched on that a little bit, but I thought that was very nuanced, very well done in terms of this ongoing thing they're dealing with of when can we be out? Can we be out? If we are pretending, what they do in this episode is basically like they switch couples to pretend to be straight, which obviously they're not.
Yeah. And we get Coney and Chevin.
We do. And they play all that, but wrestling with the fact of like, how can you be your authentic self when society can't let you be that?
Yeah.
I like the fact that they're actually having conversations about it. Like, they're not just barreling ahead and being like, well, see, this thing happened. Instead, it's the characters actually talking about it and wrestling with it emotionally and trying to figure out what it means. I thought it was well done.
I agree. I really like the way this was handled, like, really earnestly and in a real way. I love the needle drop. Why must I be a teenager in love? Great song to have them walking down the hallway to. And then when Cheryl gets juiced up by Archie's monologue and goes in and she's like, I will never sign this, and drops a little toodles to button it up. Just a great power move. Sort of bringing all of the emotional conversations they've had together and giving her a classic Cheryl button was great, I thought.
Yeah. What else? I feel like we've skipped by a lot of stuff in the episode.
Well, let's talk Betty in this. She doesn't have a ton going on, but she goes to the Blue and Gold is being shut down. And so she goes rogue and creates a pamphlet, the Teenage Mystique, and her nom de plume, the girl next door. So I think at the end of the episode, she finds out that she has a mailbag full of letters. And I think this is all setting up what we've been talking about a ton. The youth revolt is happening. Betty, I think, is going to be the leader here. Jughead is going to sort of have his, like, the anti-comic book take. He and Ethel are going to be sort of handling that. Archie, I don't know exactly where he falls in, but he wants to be able to write poetry. I think he's going to find a mentor in Grundy's husband, perhaps, which feels like an interesting twist.
Yeah. I wanted more out of the Betty storyline because I really liked where it was going. And then I completely forgot about it for the bulk of the episode. And then it came right in with the end when she got that sack of mail. I don't know. In another world, that feels like the sort of thing that could have been the thread that binds everything together throughout the episode. But clearly they wanted to go for the monologue stuff instead because that was the main thing that's driving it, which is fine. But I don't know. I think it's really interesting, and it's an interesting place to put her. I liked how they shot the typing montage with Betty, the way that Machen directed that. I thought that was really good, and it felt like it came out of a lot of stuff we've been talking about with Betty, where she is, like the rest of them, trying to find her true self and explore her true self. Like, Featherhead rightly says, I mean, he says it in a very mean way about, like, as a teenager, eventually maybe you'll find something worth saying. But the more positive way of looking at that is, as a teenager, you are figuring out what is your voice and what is the thing you want to say. And that's what Betty gets out of that conversation. And that's what pushes Betty forward to make this Teenage Mystique thing. It's the sort of thing that could potentially be used to crystallize a lot of the themes she's been dealing with sexuality, with femininity, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think we're going to get that. But to your point, to have a little bit more of it, it would have been cool to see a montage of Jughead and Ethel distributing their comics at the same time Betty's distributing her pamphlet, sort of showing the twinning of the storylines. Because I do think it's the same idea, especially where the episode ends with the comic book burning, is everyone's finding their voice, finding their passions, and using that to eventually rise up against it. All these conservative parental principle forces are like, don't do that. But they're going to have to just get them. Yeah. And that's why I like your point. You're saying, like, Featherhead basically sows the seeds of his own destruction by being like, you're going to find your voice eventually. And they're like, got it. We're coming for you, asshole.
Yeah. What else?
A couple other things I'm going to say. I love when Cheryl is like, who would try to expose me? Immediately knows it's Evelyn Ever and Ever. We get this scene where, because originally when she was introduced, she was someone masquerading as a teenager. And in this scene, they dress Evelyn like she is a 40-year-old woman who also goes to this school. And I thought that was just a funny, maybe purposeful callback to be like, she's... It was strange, but I was like, you look wildly much older than everybody else.
Yeah, I feel like they changed her hair from her last appearance, too. She did, yes. Still really like the actress. She's great.
It's not a comment on her physical appearance. Yeah. It truly is the way they styled her, and they gave her like a 50s, like an older woman in the 50s outfit to wear. Like she looks almost like she's going to a funeral or something, while everyone else is dressing like a teenager.
Well, listen, maybe part of the point there is, like you keep saying, she's part of the adult faction. She's part of the oppressive forces.
I think 100% that's why it feels deliberate that they did that.
Yeah. I also like her as a foil to Cheryl this season instead of Betty. Yeah. That's something that struck me during these scenes as well, but they work really well together. It's also a very different dynamic, the previous Evelyn versus Betty versus this Evelyn versus Cheryl, but I'm enjoying it. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to give a shout out to one line that happens earlier in the episode. I love the whole scene when Hiram comes and visits everybody at Riverdale High and gets introduced to them, all the different reactions of like, wow, a big star from Hollywood. Yeah. And Cheryl's line, which is so funny, is she's like, about Oh Mija, I really like that show, especially the first season. It kind of went downhill after that.
Just roast to the face, which was great. Also, Kevin, like, wow,
roast
very
to the face,
dashing.
but that's legit. That's what everybody says about Riverdale as well. Like, it's a meta commentary on Riverdale, 100%.
Hilarious. I didn't pick that up, but that's even funnier. Yeah. And also, what a strange idea that the reputation is it went downhill after season 1. This show has only gotten better, almost meticulously season by season, I feel like.
Yes. Well, definitely more ludicrous, at the very least. Like, whatever you think about the show, it has become... Yeah, it's become something different. And
it's become its true self. It's found its voice, Alex. It's rising up against the people that are holding it down.
You're going to start writing a pamphlet called The Riverdale Mystique, right?
Yeah, that's the next form of this podcast.
Send it to the podcaster next door.
Yeah. And you know what? It's hard to distribute a pamphlet versus release a podcast, just from an internet point of view, but yeah, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Everybody send me your addresses. I have to touch on one of the more important things here is Frank enters. He's almost fully plastic now. He's becoming the Ken. And like, I know this is like my weird thing, but he looks more plastic. Well, the way that he is strange to me.
I think what it is, maybe what you're taking away, just to throw out a theory here, is his mouth is tight, like he's holding his mouth tight and he's doing this growly thing.
Yeah, but the mustache and his just face, his cheeks he looks like an action figure. Mm-hmm. And my theory is he's maybe it's a tie into the Barbie movie. He's fully kenning. Yeah. He's kenning.
I support you in this theory. I hear you. There is somebody else that he keeps reminding me of, and it's driving me insane because I can't put my finger on it. I feel like I'm not going to get it until like the end of the season, but there's something I keep thinking like, is it a Phil Hartman character? Is it something from like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Or something like that? Whatever it is, there is somebody he's doing, and I'm going to remember it at some point and be like, oh, yes, that's 100% exactly what he's performing. But until then, I guess it's Ken from the Barbie movie.
Yeah, or maybe the stretchy guy from Toy Story, Stretch Armstrong-esque guy.
Could be that.
But in that same scene, it's just so weird. He's like, it's fine to write a poem for your gal. Like east, west, north, south. Yeah, I'm going to kiss you right on the mouth. Like, he's like, that's normal, but no more poetry for fun beyond that. Hilarious, weird.
It is hilarious and weird. Any other notes from the episode you want to call out in particular?
The other Miss Thornton scene where she's like, how did you find me? The phone book? Wow. Nailed it. Like she's
is that, I'm probably getting that wrong. Was that Toni and Fang's apartment from last season, which I think like they switched around a little bit?
I think they flipped. I flipped the other and shot it the other way. But I would assume. One other thing is like we get twice. Hiram mentions words have power, and then in this scene, Thornton says to Archie, "Words have power." And
I like that. I like that as a recurring theme. That was good. I also will mention during that scene, I got legitimately nervous that she was going to hand him the Communist Manifesto. I'd be like, "Oh no, it was all true," and now Archie is going to go to jail. Oh well.
Archie becomes a communist. Yeah. I like that she offers him a snack on the way out. That scene's button is like, did you like a snack? He's like, nah, I ate. I was like, what?
I thought there was the wrong audio in there or something because it's so quick at the end.
It's such a weird moment.
Yeah.
But speaking of audio, I love What's the Dealio from Archie, Holy Rollers and Cops, great terminology. And then Jughead at the end, Featherhead's buying comics. He's dipsy doodling us. As if that was something that people said all the time.
Well, let's talk about the end a little bit because there is this bonfire of comics that happens right outside Riverdale High. Jughead talks the whole episode, as he does at least once or twice a season, about how there's a fire coming to Riverdale and things are about to explode, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think we are legitimately going to get, I've been using the word legitimately too much this episode. Do you think we are going to get legit? Do you think we are going to get that youth rebellion coming up quick, or are there more steps to come?
I think maybe we are 2 episodes away from that. I think the end of the next episode. I feel like it's been boiling for a while and it's getting close. I think we need another episode to really get Betty's newsletter, Betty's pamphlet to be the focus. And then I think she'll sort of call for it. And then we'll get a big episode 2 away. I'm thinking could be 1 or 2 more. But isn't there, just reading the tea leaves of the schedule, we have 1 more episode and then there's a break?
Yeah. Yeah, there's the musical episode is next week, then there's the break, and then we have the final 6 episodes of the series.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Very exciting. So I think it's coming. I think it's coming soon.
All right. We'll see what happens. Before we wrap up here, let's do MVP of the episode. Justin, who's your MVP?
I got to give it up to KJ Apa for Archie's monologue. Man, that was epic. And like I was saying before, that is not an easy task, especially to have to act something, a monologue, a classic monologue in front of all of your castmates who are literally in the scene staring at you. So from a character perspective, that's, stressful. But just you and your friends who you've been working on this show, Riverdale, for all this time to be like, buckle up, here comes some very intense acting, and I hope I can nail this, and I thought he did.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll throw it out to Machen Amick as the MVP of this episode for directing. She has directed a couple of episodes before on the show. I thought this was a great one. This is definitely a different sort of episode for her. The last 2 she did, if I remember correctly, were a little more like event episodes, so this is more of an episode, which is challenging in its own way. But I think she kept all the plates running, had some good emotional moments, some very funny moments. Plus, you got Merrick Consuelos, and we didn't even talk about Marisol Nichols coming back as Hermione Lodge.
Also great.
Really good scene. I was bummed that they didn't have all 3 of them together. I assume that was a scheduling thing or something like that.
I would have loved just one crossover scene of them like passing each other in the hallway or something.
But I thought that was a really good scene with Marisol Nichols and Camila Mendez. That was very well done as well. So overall, good episode of the show.
Really good. And I love also Veronica just totally playing Monopoly with Riverdale. She's got the Pembroke under her control. Again, great possible headquarters for the Youth Revolt.
There you go. If you'd like to support this podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Riverdale, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Riverdale Dark on Twitter, Riverdale After on Instagram, Riverdale After Dark on Facebook, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, we'll see you after dark.
See you next episode, Mrs. Thornton. Let's go. Thornton Trilogy.